Great speakers. And to help us kick off today's dialogue, we wanted to welcome our amazing host, Charlene Dimas Peinado, who serves as chairwoman of the City Club Los Angeles, in addition to being president and CEO of Wellness. So a busy woman. Thank you for making time for us today.
Good evening, and buenas tardes. As mentioned, I'm Charlene Dimas Peinado, and I'm the chairwoman of City Club LA. On behalf of the Executive Board of Governors, our membership, and our staff, welcome. If you're not familiar with City Club LA, we are a premier business club that brings industry leaders together to not only do business, but to forge connections with like-minded professionals. If you're interested in learning more about us, please either see me or one of our staff. As we're always proud to talk about the wonderful history that City Club LA has here in Los Angeles. As mentioned, I am also the president and CEO of Wellness. We're a behavioral health and housing organization serving the greater Los Angeles area. And so I was thrilled to hear from Esperanza and Sharon about hosting the Latino Collaborative Media about ethnic media. And I said, absolutely, this is what City Club is all about. It's to be able to provide you with a venue where all of us can gather our community leaders, our innovators, and have these courageous conversations, right, as we're going to have this evening. So I'm happy to host you. Now, just to talk about the power of ethnic media, just last week, Wellness did a groundbreaking for this new housing development that we're going to be developing in the USC area. And I could not be prouder of having Calo News there, La Opinión, LA Sentinel, Telemundo, Univision, Urbanize LA, NBC News, and Enfoque. Because we are speaking openly about mental health and how it impacts the Latino community, housing and how it impacts the Latino community. And by having the ethnic media there, we're able to talk about the cultural relevance and how mental health is having an impact on our community. We're able to build a trust in our community, bring awareness, education, but more importantly, reduce the stigma around mental health. So I just wanted to share an example of how we very much at Wellness appreciate ethnic media and how you support us to lift the work that we do in Los Angeles. So with that, welcome and thank you for selecting City Club LA for your venue.
Thank you so much, Charlene. I would invite folks in the back, if you guys could find a seat, that would be great. I think we still have room available in some of the seats up here. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arturo Carmona, president of the Latino Media Collaborative, and I'm so excited to be here with you all today. The Latino Media Collaborative is a young organization committed to advancing Latino journalism and media through advocacy, capacity building, and impactful local news content that covers gaps and strengthens the media ecosystem for Latino communities. For decades, leaders in the Latino media community have struggled with not being given a fair shake, getting pennies on the dollar when state or other resources are distributed. And the Latino community in Los Angeles is home to the largest news deserts and continues to be ignored or underserved by leading journalism institutions. Over the past 15 years, about 1/4 of California newspapers have shut down. Just in the past year, we have seen widespread media layoffs, and those job cuts have hit especially hard on journalists of color. In January, of course, most people heard of the LA Times laying off 115 people, including about 1/4 of its newsroom employees. Young Latino and journalists of color were among the most widely impacted. Their tenure was shorter and of course the most impacted by the layoffs. What we have here, what we have heard less of is the layoffs that La Opinión, key broadcast newsrooms, and local Latino outlets have made over the last few years, with major implications for local journalism in our communities. And we also need to talk about the struggles and contributions of sister outlets within the vibrant and expansive ethnic media community in the region. Black, API, and other outlets make up a rich, multilingual, multicultural, and multi-generational sector that demands direct attention and support. With Latinos now accounting for 40% of the state's population and a virtual majority of the population in LA County and LA City, a deepening regional crisis in journalism disproportionately impacts Latinos, and so this time could not be more dire. As you will hear from other speakers, we also live in a difficult time in our country. The economic decline of middle and working class Americans, the concentration of wealth at the top, and many other factors has created the conditions that are ripe for division in our country, ripe for racial and political and issue polarization, and ripe for disinformation and attacks on the media that can threaten our democracy. And so here we stand with a local news crisis that threatens so much, but there's also hope. A series of philanthropic and government initiatives, many of which the Latino Media Collaborative has played a critical role in, are moving forward, offering new sources of revenue to protect journalism. In government, for instance, we are working on a package of solutions, including enacting New York City model legislation that ensures that at least 50% of ad revenue and ad expenses from the state goes to ethnic and community media. We are also working to protect victories such as the UC Fellows program that we achieved collectively 2 years ago through a $25 million grant program that supports journalists within California outlets. And more recently, the LFC has weighed in strongly on legislation that would require Google, Facebook, and other tech companies to create a fund from their news digital ad revenue earmarked for news outlets, with the prospect of creating an over $100 million fund every year. The collaborative has from day one demanded that any solution advanced must create journalism equity and a journalism equity carve-out that earmarks at least 33% for ethnic, independent, and local news outlets. With so much more remaining to be seen, we are hopeful by our conversations with members of the legislature that sensible and equitable solutions can take shape. We will do this we continue to do this because we recognize that with the appropriate firewalls and protections, government has a key role to play in protecting journalism. And so with the LMC, we will continue to work in Sacramento, but also in LA County, in LA City, and other key jurisdictions to ensure that media equity is a lens that is used every time we look at reaching out to the community. At the end of the day, we will need government, philanthropy, and the private sector if we are going to be successful. And so it's inspiring to see that national, state, and regional philanthropy is now taking a note on this growing crisis and is stepping up. Local community foundations up and down California are creating local media funds with great success, and we hope that Los Angeles will follow soon. You also now have Press Forward and the American Journalism Project looking to raise millions in new resources to support journalism in our region. And so in this moment of crisis, you have government and philanthropy exploring how to intervene. So how do we move forward? Do we replicate the mistakes of the past? Or do we innovate towards a new inclusive future? Do we come together in good faith and design solutions and cover gaps? Do we work together to design an ecosystem with resources and create a more thriving local news sector for all? The next few months here in Los Angeles and in Sacramento, key decisions will be made that give us a clear picture on where we stand and the impact it will have on our sector for years to come. On behalf of Latino media partners in the region, we look forward to being good partners in this difficult but critical path ahead. Before I conclude, I also want to share an exciting new initiative we are working on in Southeast Los Angeles, a region historically neglected by mainstream journalism, and since the closing of Eastside Group Publications, arguably the largest news desert in Los Angeles. In partnership with the CELA Collaborative, and I see Wilma Franco, I saw her earlier. Wilma, ¿dónde estás? Aquí está. We're very excited to be working on a CELA journalism initiative focused on providing dedicated reporting staff and capacity to develop daily news content in the region. Through a well-rounded effort, including community listening sessions, audience surveys, and partner engagement, we are very excited about this new effort and the impact it can have in Southeast Los Angeles. The goal is to ensure that the most pressing issues impacting Latinos are being covered. the beautiful and inspiring, the ugly, and the challenges and opportunities. We hope you can join us in our May Diálogo event as we formally launch this partnership. And now let me say that today we have a star-studded panel of journalists and experts who will offer a variety of visions for the way forward. We will begin our conversation with opening remarks by Mónica Lozano, who is the chair of the LA Local News Initiative and has given so much to LA media. This is the time to lead. This is the time to fight for journalism. And we are excited to work hand in hand to achieve a media ecosystem that is more equitable, inclusive, and impactful, meeting the needs of our diverse communities. Thank you so much. Mónica?
Thank you, Arturo, and I couldn't get my printer to work, so I have my iPad here. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be with you. I'm Mónica Lozano, as Arturo said, and I want to thank the Latino Media Collaborative, to the panelists, and to the speakers, and congratulations to all of you on this inaugural Diálogo event today. And thank you all for being here. I had the privilege of working at La Opinión for over 30 years. I experienced firsthand the vital role that local journalism plays in building social cohesion and civic engagement. I know what it means to have a solid newsroom of skilled and talented reporters dedicated to their craft and commitment to report accurately on our community. And I also know the pain of losing it because of economic pressures. But I'm proud of what we were able to accomplish. And I am optimistic, not just about the past, but for the path forward. Over these years, we've had great examples of quality local media, many of them represented in this room. You have played an outsized role to inform, to educate, and to empower communities. You have served as resources to help navigate complex systems, engaged in citizenship campaigns, produced voter information guides, promoted participation in programs like the census, including instructions on how to fill out the form, when and how to apply for medical benefits. The list goes on and on. Local Latino media has been there as a trusted partner. And you've told stories through the eyes of those closest to the issues, because our reporters, our writers, our columnists, our photographers, our digital content producers, most often come from and live in the communities they cover. Local news sources have brought an authentic perspective to information that resonates with our audiences, that is more real and more relevant. And we also know that local journalism is vital for informing residents about government decision-making and the issues that most directly impact them. It serves to empower people well beyond voting, providing the information, tools, and resources to demand accountability from elected officials, to advocate alongside our community-based organizations for the better schools, the transportation, the clean and safe neighborhoods, for affordable housing, for quality jobs, for what we deserve as a community. Local journalism's role in strengthening democracy is well documented and cannot be understated. But having said all this, and because of the economic forces that Arturo outlined, and the decline in local outlets and reporting staff, there is a growing disconnect between the information needs of community and what is available. Based on recently conducted research by our friends at the American Journalism Project, we learned that residents here in Los Angeles, especially in low income and communities of color, feel that their voices are not amplified, that they are not represented, or worse, are misrepresented, that the distinct nature of our neighborhood is overshadowed by sensationalism and negative stories. People want context, they want explanation, they want solutions, they want accountability and verified facts, but they struggle to find them. Today's panel is titled Crisis in Local Media, but I want to suggest, as Arturo did, that from crisis comes opportunity. An opportunity to reimagine and reinvent local media through an equity lens. An opportunity to act boldly, with urgency, to support our local media, especially our Latino and ethnic media, given the precipitous decline in resources and staff. Perhaps this is an opportunity to be creative and innovative, to be forward-facing as we think about what is needed to support and sustain local media. Can we ask ourselves, as audacious as this audience is, and I know many of you, is there a new model to support, expand, and sustain local media? One that we can collectively embrace. It's no longer about a single media outlet serving the needs of Los Angeles. There has to be a model that ensures local media is more inclusive, more accessible, and more diverse. And we can find a way forward where the voices, the interests, the languages, and the needs of all our communities are fully represented in what gets covered, how it's produced, how it's shared, and how it's distributed. I believe that there is. For a region as large and complex, though, we have to do it collectively. We need an ecosystem approach to closing information gaps, to rebuilding trust in media, and giving our communities a heightened sense of agency. If we believe, as we all here absolutely do, I'm sure, that local Latino media is at the cornerstone of our nation's democracy, then it's imperative that we work together to rebuild this vital information infrastructure. And, like Arturo said, government, business, and philanthropy can and should play a role. And I know Miguel Santana of the California Community Foundation will talk about the important role of philanthropy following the panel. But let's today commit to working together to rebuilding our local media ecosystem, one that leads to more civic engagement, to stronger and healthier communities, to a more representative and equitable democracy, to a better future for all of us and those to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monica. Those very prescient words. So my name is Martha Diaz. I'm the general manager of Calo News. I've been in the LA journalism world for about 25 years now. Really happy to be working with Calo News and experimenting and launching pretty much what we're talking about right now, a new outlet and doing some innovative reporting and journalism. So with that, we have a group of panelists I'm going to bring up now. If you guys can make your way up to the front here. Martha, Jessica, Gabriel, Sue, and I'll introduce each one of you. We might have a couple of extra chairs. Okay, so let me start here. Give me 1 second as we get our microphones situated. Okay, in keeping with the spirit of Diálogo, we are going to have a Q&A session after we have our conversation here. So hold your questions, and I'm hoping you guys have a lot of questions. I know we have a lot of journalists in the room and some heavy hitters, so make sure you guys ask questions, because we definitely have some time set up to have a dialogue with our panelists. And then after our conversation, we will have a reception, just to let you know the next part of our presentation. Okay, are we all ready? So let me introduce Martha Diaz Askenazy. And you're sitting at the end there. So Martha has been the owner and publisher of the San Fernando Valley Sun and El Sol newspapers for the last 21 years. She currently serves on the boards of the California Newspaper Publishers Association, the National Newspaper Association, and she is a proud member of the Latino Media Collaborative. So let's welcome Martha.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here today, and I'm sure many of you could probably tell the story I'm going to tell, but I'm going to tell you mine so that you can see what it is that we do. As the owner and publisher of the San Fernando Valley Sun El Sol newspaper, I take great pride in saying that we cover the news of the San Fernando Valley in English and Spanish with a focus on the communities in the northeast San Fernando Valley, like no one else can because of how long we have been in and our knowledge of the community. Our editorial team is comprised of 3 bicultural and bilingual reporters, which gives them an advantage in reporting the local news. They are guided by a seasoned editor named Diana Martinez, maybe some of you might know here in the room, who has been working with me for over 20 years. I think I was very lucky to have run across her and that her mission aligns with mine. And we have had other reporters that have been with us for a long time that have retired. So we have a new group of folks, that are on board, but are very courageous and are doing the good work to cover our community. In addition, we also have an office manager and a sales manager. Of course, you have to have sales, to be able to stay in business. We're a dedicated group that understands that newspapers are unlike any other businesses. We are mission-driven and protected under the First Amendment. I've had people who come in who are bloggers and say they want to partner with us. I say, you don't understand what we stand for. We're mission-driven. We're different. We're like no other. I feel like I'm the caretaker of almost a person. The San Fernando Valley Sun, who's been circulating since 1904 in the San Fernando Valley. And I take great care. And I hope that I can, keep it alive so that it continues to cover the stories of the San Fernando Valley, especially the immigrant communities that, are in the Northeast Valley. So my team is so dedicated, as you know, many of you multitask. And when I say multitask, it's probably just an understatement because we do whatever it takes to get the story and meet deadline. We have never not met deadline. There is no pandemic, there is no flu, there is nothing that is going to keep us from printing on time and getting our news out to our community. So, it's a great feeling to know that if we were, going to war, I'm going to war with these people because they are absolutely dedicated to the mission. So I think I'm very, very lucky in that sense. Just to give you a sense, we publish 10,000 papers a week. We do have an online presence. We do have a website. We do have an active social media, both on Facebook and Instagram. I've done everything, that people have said I should do, to get more digital ads, and I got to tell you that it's not enough. It's not enough. And it's not for a lack of trying. Okay. I don't want to bury the lead here, like my editor says. Sometimes people. So I want to take a moment to say we need help, seriously. With the loss of ad revenues, and I've heard that it's been as much as 80%, and they've gone primarily to large platforms online. And as a free paper like mine, who relies on ads, we need funding sources to make up this loss until we can find a way to replace it, until we find that model that we were alluding to earlier. In the blue-collar immigrant community, the Sun circulates, and paid subscriptions and ad dollars to local businesses are hard to come by. We've tried asking people to subscribe. We wouldn't put up a paywall because we probably might lose, our readers. $5, $10 is a lot of money. Some people may think it's not, but it is. And, that shouldn't stop anybody. So we rely on larger regional and government ads that include public notices as well. As an adjudicated paper, we fight every year to keep public notices alive and to be printed in our paper. It makes up about a third of our revenues, just to give you an idea of how important they are to our survival. To continue to publish and thrive, we must have the resources to hire professional, experienced staff and cover the cost of doing business that include printing and the distribution of our paper. By the way, the papers are very much alive still, okay? And people want them. Whenever we have people in the paper, they come and want it by the hundreds. If their kids are in the paper, they're calling and asking, where is it? Where can I find it? We tell them it's online. No, I want a paper. So we're right on the mall in the city of San Fernando, so people can come, the good, the bad, the ugly, they come and they get in our face. And it's great to know when people are just picking up the paper, I see them picking it up. So it's still valuable to folks. It's not dead, let me say that. And they want to
Martha,
keep
if
it.
I can interrupt, if you could speak a little bit closer to the mic.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
There you go.
Okay, so many people make the mistake of thinking that community newspapers can get by hiring less experienced reporters, but doing so would only limit our reporting capabilities. Our staff has to be able to report on all kinds of issues that range from, issues of democracy, voting, health, features, and as many of you experts here in the room, reporters know, sometimes you have a beat. You're lucky enough to have a beat, and that's what you do. A community paper, we're more like a mash unit. We have to do a little bit of everything to get the job done. And as my editor says, there are many writers, but few reporters can write in news form. And that is something that we feel is lacking. And it's not just reporters that we need. We also need folks who can help us with our website and social media sites to extend our reach so that we can compete for digital ads more effectively. We do the best that we can with the team that we have, and we're proud of our results, but we do need experts. And with that, it takes funding to do that. Community newspaper publishers are business owners. And we know that this business, and we understand how important it is to continue covering the communities in which we circulate. And we'll work as creatively as we can to get the job done. I understand that without the Sun's coverage, the stories in the Northeast Valley would go untold. The Northeast Valley is an area that has been deemed at risk by the state of California, an area that at the height of the COVID pandemic led the nation in deaths. In February, we reported that San Fernando Valley is also the epicenter of a silicosis epidemic, and that Assemblymember Luz Rivas was introducing legislation to protect stoneworkers. Many of the fabrication shops are in the Northeast Valley, making our coverage that much more relevant. We also protect democracy. We had a national movement in the city of San Fernando that included Proud Boys, that included LOCA, that included folks that are so right-wing and are paying, to train parents in the community, and they wrap themselves around the label of they're here for parents' rights. What I think is kind of funny is that they picked the name LOCA because that's the acronym for, leave our kids alone. And I thought it was kind of funny because LOCA in Spanish kind of means crazy. So, but anyway, it's with a K. And they have made inroads. They actually got a person elected to Cindy Montañez as MTC. Cindy Montañez was a city council member in the city of San Fernando. She passed away, and they did get somebody in. So the city of San Fernando could go the way of many other cities, perhaps. But we are that little thin line. We keep informing, telling people what's going on. They get angry at us. They call me out online on Instagram because I'm the owner of the paper. So when you're right there, on ground zero, you also get to be in hand-to-hand combat. So, it's not for the faint of heart if you do this. But we will continue doing it because we feel we need to inform the community. The Northeast Valley is extremely conservative, and some of these folks align with these values, but there's also another side to it too. And we want to let everybody know what's going on. So we will continue to cover it as best as we can. Our coverage is diverse, and as they say, we cover the good, the bad, and the ugly, week in and week out. And in doing so, we have loyal readers who count on our reporting to learn about the happenings in the community. I'm positive about the future. I want to keep fighting, and I know that there are also like-minded people that want to help us to get this done. And I truly, truly believe that we can't let journalism die. We have to continue with our craft because we are just vitally important to our communities, to our democracy, and without it, I think it would be a really scary place. So I thank you for listening to what I have to say today, and I know that many of you probably have equally even better stories, but I want to thank all the reporters that are in the room here because you guys are phenomenal, and I think you are definitely I would say courageous, and continue doing what you do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martha. And I actually have some questions to ask you,
Oh,
but I
you
just
do?
wanted to make sure, I wanted to let you go because that was great great information. But one of the things I want to hear from you is just from your experience, and you've touched on a few of these, but as your role as a publisher, how do you think you might be able to replicate some of your success? How can some outlets, or maybe when we're trying to learn how to structure something, what could you say could be some of the nuggets of information that have led to your success and your longevity, 21 years as a publisher?
Well, I think part of it is also finding like-minded people. I know that LMC has also been a good partner in going out after, like, for example, state agencies to be able to get some bigger ads from them, bigger ad campaigns. I would say make friends with, PR agencies, that like and support, ethnic media. It's very important to do that. Also, staying in touch with the local, governments that are around. So picking the pocket of all those people, looking for new ideas, putting up your website, and social media, that all helps you, because in the end, some of it comes back. Last year in digital media, I'll be very transparent here. In digital media, we had about $9,000 for the year. This year, we started the year off with $9,000 in digital ads. So but definitely it's not gonna float our boat, but it is helpful. So I would say, try new things, partner up with people, attend meetings, call people, make cold calls. Don't be afraid to do any of that. That's what we do, to get that going.
Great, thank you, Martha. So our next panelist, Jessica Gonzalez, is co-CEO of Free Press. Jessica is an attorney and racial justice advocate, advancing Free Press's mission of building media and technology that serves truth and justice. Jessica has been a leader in the fight to push tech companies to crack down on hate and disinformation. She also co-founded Change the Terms, a coalition of more than 60 civil and digital rights groups working to disrupt online hate. And with that, Jessica, I've got questions, but if you want to give an introductory presentation, I'd love to.
Sure, thanks so much, and thank you for your remarks too. It's so important what you're doing. So I also feel like I should disclose that I'm a proud LMC board member, but in my day job, I do run Free Press. Free Press is, just to be clear, not the Detroit Free Press. It is not a newsroom, but rather it is a policy shop and an organizing project that is trying to build the type of media system that we need to support a just and multiracial democracy. We understand the outsized impact that media has on the way people understand the world around them, and we understand its critical responsibility to inform people. So unlike my esteemed co-panelists here, I'm not a journalist. I'm just a journalist wannabe. As a young Chicana growing up here in LA, in the 80s and 90s, I wanted nothing more than to be a journalist. I noticed a lack of Latina journalists and a lack of stories about people like me and my family. And I really wanted to see that covered more in mainstream media. But I also experienced the presence of racism in mainstream media, and especially as Prop 187 moved to the ballot. It was very clear how the anti-Mexican rhetoric jumped to the plate, the schoolyard, from the way certain media outlets, not all, of course, were covering the issues. So all this to say that journalism really matters. And good journalism can make a huge difference in our society. It helps us understand what's going on in our communities, and it helps us hold our leaders accountable. But bad journalism, and there's some out there, can do a lot of harm. It can normalize racism and stereotypes. It can undermine democracy and sow division and make some of us less safe in our own skin. So what we know, right, is that the mainstream media hasn't always served communities of color well, right? That's why we've built all of these important ethnic media organizations so that our families can have context and news and information to help our families thrive and survive. And we have in California over 300 outlets that publish and broadcast throughout the state. They are serving at least 38 different ethnic, racial, and cultural communities. And I just want to say, before I get into my ideas for the future, how grateful I am to all of you, how important and heroic your work is, and I really believe it ought to be supported. So I'm not a journalist, but I'm a lawyer and a policy wonk, and my team has thought through, how do we make this happen? How do we enrich local journalism and ensure specifically the communities of color get the coverage that we deserve? And at the end of the day, we understand local news and civic information as a public good that deserves public and government support. Right now, thanks largely to runaway media consolidation and to hedge fund greed, news and information is critically underproduced by the commercial market. It's just a fact. Without a doubt, journalism is in crisis. And over the past 20 years, we've lost half of the local reporters on state and local beats across the US, 40% of reporters here in our state. Yet I am encouraged about this moment, and I'll tell you why. There is a movement of civic-minded journalists, ethnic media outlets, community leaders, and philanthropists who are doing some really smart thinking about how to fill these gaps. The field doesn't have all the resources it needs yet. We're working on that. But we know that philanthropic dollars and commercial systems alone aren't going to do the trick here. We can't chart a sustainable and an equitable future for local news without structural policy change. I know everyone's eyes are glazing over. She said structural policy change. But at Free Press, we've helped chart a path for this that I'm really excited about, the roadmap for local news. It helped inform press forward initiatives, exciting new and historic investment to reinvigorate local journalism. And we're seeing lawmakers across the country get increasingly excited and interested in efforts to support local media. The trick now is directing that energy into solutions that actually make a difference and to not simply have lawmakers line the pockets of some of the same corporate media giants that have done so much to add to the information crisis that we're in. I want to point to one really interesting policy solution in New Jersey. Free Press worked with lawmakers, and we also organized a statewide grassroots campaign. In 2018, we created something called the New Jersey Civic Information Consortium. It's a first of its kind nonprofit that invests in public and philanthropic dollars into projects, for-profit and nonprofit projects that address critical community information gaps. To date, that consortium's distributed over $5 million to bridge the gaps. It's granted money to over 80 grantees, with a vast majority of these grants going to ethnic media and other projects led by people of color. We're really proud of that effort. We think it's a really interesting model. Do we need to scale those investments? Yes, absolutely. But this kind of targeted public grant making is one of the strongest models we've seen to directly address coverage gaps in local news, especially as the commercial media model wanes. By focusing these public dollars on public interest journalism, the New Jersey Civic Info Consortium is helping to correct some of the long-standing inequities in our media system. Another interesting model is right here in our state, the California Local News Fellowship that LMC and Free Press helped bring about. In 2022, lawmakers dedicated $25 million to this program. It's an initiative run out of UC Berkeley. It places 40 early career journalists into newsrooms. The first cohort of fellows started in September. I think it's a really interesting project, but of course, as Martha said, we can't just have new journalists. We really have to be investing in people who are seasoned and know how to run a newsroom and how to do the in-depth reporting that's so important to our communities. So that's why we also support AB 1511. That's a measure that was driven in part by Latino Media Collaborative, and that is an effort to create the Office of Ethnic Media, help ensure that ethnic and community media can play a role in delivering public information campaigns from state agencies. We know that Latinos and other ethnic media outlets have been utilized when it comes to making sure that state funds and state agencies are getting public health messaging and other important get out the vote and whatnot out to communities. So, I'm going to bring it home here. I just want to say I think we have a real moment here, and there's a lot to be worried about, but there's a lot of interesting ideas percolating, and I think it's really important that we are organized. I think it's really important that we really focus on the solutions and make sure that they do what folks say they're supposed to do. I have to say I'm quite worried, for instance, about the California Journalism Preservation Act that would hand a lot of money over to out-of-state media giants at the expense of ethnic media outlets. I think significant alterations would be needed to make that really work for ethnic media. And one thing I know is that no great solution to this crisis centers on any one entity or any one center of gravity, and I'm really looking forward to working together with all of you, and just so much deep gratitude and respect for all the journalists, reporters in the room. You're doing just such great work. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jessica. Okay, our next panelist, Gabriel Lerner, editor emeritus for La Opinión. Gabriel is former editor-in-chief of La Opinión in Los Angeles and continues to write editorials in his column Gente de Los Angeles. He is also the founder and editor of Hispanic LA, a collective Spanish blog which started in January of 2009. Gabriel has written 4 books and is proud father of 4 boys. So Gabriel, do you have some comments that you want to maybe come up here and present?
I have to speak from the desk because I am timid. I look at you and I think maybe I'm in a reunion of La Opinión. So many people that I am really missing. I want to speak about passion, about Latino journalism. For La Opinión, Calo News, The Sun, El Informador del Valle de Coachella, Latino journalism is journalism for the Latino community with a passion, with a Latino identity, with the meaning of representation and solidarity by Latino journalists that are embedded in their communities because they belong in them. And from there they can write about immigration, labor rights, the rise in gang violence, growing without fathers, corruption in local government, the duty free, drug overdoses. Even when the small outlets don't have staff to report breaking news on a regular basis, we represent the state of mind of the community. The banner on the top of the logo of every print edition of La Opinión, I don't know if we have one here, says, con la comunidad hispana cada día. Con la comunidad hispana, I wrote that several years ago, and it stays every day. But that was true since 1926, when La Opinión started. When the economic crisis of 2008 hit, the young staff of the new website used to call us the legacy, but they were the first to go when the layoffs started. This happens when you realize that the type that you printed that is too small. All of them, but 3 in one day. So it's not entirely true that the internet caused the crisis in print. This was just the beginning. All the copy editors were terminated in one day. One is here. The 13 photographers. Then they had to sell the printing press and dozens of workers lost their jobs as well. Same for IT, HR, salespeople, administrations, and reporters, one by one. Very sad. And then there was a chain reaction. Instead of a broadsheet format, in 2014 we moved to tabloid. After many years of selling for one quart, the price of the paper increased. Circulation kept shrinking, advertisement went down. From 44 pages, we went to small 32, 28. The decimated team was not able to create the same product, and then the cycle started again. But we survived. Our readers are still interested in understanding our society, and we explain it. La opinión nos informa, they say. La opinión nos representa, nos defiende, nos entretiene. La opinión is today a small miracle still printed every day of the year. And the editor of La Opinión is here, Armando Varela. But many others, as you know, have stopped publication. Others kept firing journalists, cutting out of the cadre of those who can distinguish between truth and the fake news and conspiracy theories. This election is going to be framed around who we trust, but when our community will come to us with questions, we may not have the answers. Immigrants will be crucial to the campaign, so it's more important than ever to support them, and for that we need more support than ever for us. Solutions. In the newsroom, we can continue to improve and innovate and diversify. But we have to build an organization that represents us, the publication, the editors, the reporters. Unidos se puede. We are experiencing it now in the Latino media collaboration. And the voice that can lobby for us in Sacramento. A representation that works to achieve some justice in the distribution of advertising money from the government. And an alliance with non-profits that are committed like we are to the community. There are already dozens of Latino outlets that have authentic roles in society, and keep trying. Every new initiative should support the existing outlets, and look for ways to ally with them in developing the solutions. Spanish media newsrooms need more support than ever, and funding has to go to their survival, so we can write the stories that are still waiting for us.
Thank you, Gabriel. And I need to add, Gabriel is also a member, our board member of the Latino Media Collaborative. I want to ask you something. I'm going to put you on the spot. Is that okay? Okay. Because we're talking a lot about the ecosystem and how it affects the Latino community. What you're talking about with La Opinión, this is directly impacting probably the people that are most in danger and need the most coverage. So with all these cuts, I mean, what are your thoughts on how we can actually innovate and try to reach Latinos, especially Spanish-speaking immigrant Latinos? What are your thoughts on some of the innovations we can do?
It's a common task for all of us here. I see here representatives from newspapers, from websites, from organizations, community organizations, from donors, funders. And I think this is an extraordinary manifestation of what we can do. Because La Opinión will continue to appear every day. You don't imagine the small size of the newsroom now. How many editors and reporters there are. And I'm not going to say, but it must not be the end of the road. From there it can continue, there can be a revival. There can be a revival of the Latino journalism and of our readers. So I hope that this works here, and nunca deje de tener esperanza.
Muchas gracias. Thank you. Okay, with that, let me introduce our next panelist, Sue Cross. Sue is former CEO of the Institute for Nonprofit News and currently CEO of Cross Media. Sue specializes in network strategies to reinvent journalism, nonprofit entrepreneurship, and other new models for public service coverage and effective media development. She founded Cross Media to help news companies and causes grow in fast-changing environments. She was CEO of INN for over 8 years. So I'll let you, if you have a prepared statement, we can go off that, and I can ask you some questions.
Sure, I'll just talk a little bit about what brought me here, which actually goes back a little farther than INN, the Institute for Nonprofit News. I'm not sure if this is working. Okay, thank you very much. But I want to cast a little bigger picture because we are in crisis in media, but what I've spent the last decade working on is really this renaissance that we are now seeing, and it has happened across the country. It is now spreading globally, and it is growing here in LA as well as philanthropists, civic leaders, journalists, all kinds of people come together and try to figure out new ways of reporting information and bringing it to people. And this is working. It's still small, nascent, compared to the really, truly devastating cuts in our newspapers, in all kinds of journalism, but it is growing at about 20% a year. It is not an issue of nonprofit versus for-profit. It's really about the reporting, and it gets shared across all kinds of media. And this has been growing at about 20% a year across the country. There are now about 500 nonprofit news outlets. Some of them you know here in LA, Hollow itself, Boyle Heights Beat, LA Public Press, Witness LA, Capital in Maine, and I could go on. There's about 60 now in California altogether. And across the country, they're all small, but they represent, that's probably close to 5,000 journalists now. So collectively, and they report collectively, it is not a small thing. It's a rapidly growing movement that is restoring journalism. And that's happening here in LA as well. And so Arturo had asked me to speak about that and those trends happening. The few other things I wanted to say that I think are really important here, I think the economic pressures on commercial ad-based media are going to get even more difficult. And what Martha is doing, what the LA Times is doing, what everyone is doing in media is just heroic to keep the reporting going. But I think we have to be clear-eyed and say, okay, if ad money alone won't support this, how do we keep this in the community? Because ultimately, I'm a journalist, right? I started as a reporter, worked as an editor, I ran the EP Bureau here in LA for years. But this is not about journalism. Journalism is really about the community and whether you want to live in a democracy. And that's what it boils down to. So when we have this conversation, we need to have the conversation with a lot of people who aren't journalists and say, okay, this is a big community problem. How are we going to support it? What reporting do we need? How are we going to pay for it? And the answers to that may be all different in different neighborhoods, even within Los Angeles or different cities. It is a mix of government funding. Free Press is doing amazing work, as are others in advocating for that. Advertising is a piece of it. Major organized philanthropy is providing about half the funding for this renaissance that is going on. But about a third is really intriguing to me. It's philanthropy that's from just individuals, everyday people, and I think that is what you see growing, and that's what you see working when we can have these conversations in the community and approach it as a shared problem, as a shared community building issue. I think it's also important as we talk about this, I'm not Latino, I'm Anglo, but this is LA. Mainstream media here has to be Latino media. Otherwise it's not covering LA. As well as having dedicated ethnic media, community media, and things that focus on all the different issues. The final thing I'd say in general is, this is a hard one even for me. I love newspapers, I grew up with newspapers, grew up with broadcast TV, but the media of the future is not going to look like what looks like journalism to me, what I'm really comfortable with. It is changing, and some of those ways we can predict, and some of those values we need to hold on to, like it should be factual, should be independent, it should be transparent about if it's connected with a cause or has a point of view, that it is out there in the open so anyone can tell what that point of view is. But what form it takes, what it looks like, how it's distributed, invest in experimentation. If you're a philanthropist, you can do that. The government structures, the systemic stuff will probably be more formatted, and we see really passionate, innovative individuals reinventing this field. And so it's really important to invest in that as well, and experiment.
Thank you, Sue. And I wanted to touch a little bit on that more because you were quoted in an article that Neiman Labs put out entitled "Patterns in Philanthropy Leave Small Newsrooms Behind." And you spoke about that experimentation, and I love the quote of supporting small, scrappy upstarts. From your experience, I mean, you've seen a lot of small, scrappy upstarts. What is the one common thing that you've seen that makes them succeed? And I saw a number somewhere like 95% success rate for some of those smaller outlets. So what are some of the common themes and things that you've seen?
So just a little bit of context. I spent most of my career at the Associated Press, which is, if not it's one of the world's biggest media companies. And so I had this idea of scale. And then I left AP to move back to LA, which I love more than anywhere. And I became fascinated with this little world of nonprofit news startups. And I just had this strong gut sense, this matters. They're tiny, this is crazy, this makes no sense, but it really matters. And so that's why I got involved in this. In tracking it over the last 8 years when I ran the Institute for Nonprofit News, we actually started benchmarking financial measures, what works, what doesn't work, who builds audience. And everyone wants a silver bullet. Everyone wants the answer. They want to frame the solution for LA or the solution for Chicago or this or that. We're not there yet. Maybe in 10 to 20 years, we'll see those patterns and you can say, well, in this size community, it's this, that, and the other thing. What is working now, the one common thread, is that the solutions are coming out of each community. Some places that's as small as a neighborhood. It might be a town of 3,000 people in a rural area. But it's coming out of the community, not just journalists alone, not philanthropists, not really any civic leaders. It comes from that community conversation. And then it may take all different forms, but wherever they start with that and build like community excitement around it, these things are surviving. INN, which only started 15 years ago, this nascent network, it's 94% of them that have been tracked for 15 years are surviving. So it's not, they're small, they look different, but it's actually quite successful. And if you are looking at what can we do in LA, is this risky, we don't know if it'll work, you're probably making a good bet. If people in the community want this journalism and you have a passionate journalist to run it, go for it, because that's where the successes are coming out of.
Great. Thank you, Sue. And with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. I know there's a lot of journalists here. Please stand up. And if you need a microphone, let us know.
Okay. Hi, I'm Mariah. I'm the co-founder of Public Press, and I'm here with my colleagues, Matt, our founder, and Gabe, our editorial director. And my question was, what's a good example of coordinating with other newsrooms for coverage? Because we know that as a community, we're really stronger together. will have news reporting together, coverage, to reporting on coverage, to really support each other. Because I really think that, together as a community, we're a lot stronger. So, yeah, I'm in the middle of some great examples.
We've never technically collaborated with anybody, but I know that the LA Times is here, and I know that when we bring a story, that maybe it's too big for us somehow, our editor tries to get it up to them because, they have way more protection and resources perhaps than we may have. And so, for example, we had the Mexican mafia killed somebody in the city of San Fernando one morning, and we were concerned, we broke it, as much as we could, but we're right there on the mall, and we know these folks are real. So we kind of did as much as we could, and then had to leave it alone. And I know that, for example, the LA Times had covered the murder of the kingpin whose girlfriend was murdered in San Fernando, right? So they did it, and that was great. So we let them take that. So yeah, so it's not, we didn't coordinate, technically, but we kind of worked in that way. Or we'll call it the newsrooms, when there's something really big. And that's kind of how we've done it. That's kind of been the extent of our cooperation and coordination.
Hey, I'm Matt, Zenoco, publisher, founder of LA Public Press. I'm curious about the intersection between public policy and the sustainability of journalism in particular. By my read, just looking at the CJPA stuff coming down the pipe this year, it seems to be a sort of snake fight amongst a group of different publishers with different business models that is functionally, the point is it's really complicated to develop public policy for an industry that has really divergent business models. And it has me in the position of wondering, actually, is this a circumstance where what my line should be is pump the brakes a little bit, which is at odds with the financial desperation that the industry is in. But in my view, it's something that we get one shot at, honestly. And I don't know if that's an opinion of just my own, but this is kind of what I was hoping to hear a little bit more from the group on the stage about, just insofar as there's a bill in the state assembly, in our state legislature this year that's going to affect everybody in this room. Presumably, we need a decade of bills, and I'm just curious what your thinkings are in terms of the longer-term circumstance for public policy, in particular with our First Amendment, which also complicates it in some ways, as much as we live and die by that.
I can speak to that a bit. In my experience, it takes 10 years to pass a great bill. We've been involved in passing probably 4 or 5 media-related bills, either in states or through the federal government, and it takes a while to really have something take root and to make sure that it's sound public policy. I think we can do better than CJPA. I understand the attraction to it because tech companies have really harmed our communities. And, I think we ought to be thinking about some sort of carbon tax on tech companies that gets reallocated to journalists and to support journalism, to be frank. My concern about that particular bill, though, is that it incentivizes payment to out-of-state hedge fund companies, and it doesn't ensure that it actually reaches the intended audience, which is to make sure that there is more robust local reporting. I don't know about one shot. My co-CEO also thinks that we have one shot, but I also am feeling this renaissance. I love that you called it a renaissance. And I'm seeing in different state houses across the country, and to a certain extent, even in our messed up federal government, there are people really thinking carefully about how do we design legislation that moves the money to both commercial and non-commercial outlets that are filling information gaps.
All right, I'm going to weigh in here. As somebody who has to keep the lights on, I'm impatient. And I can't wait 10 years. I've been in Sacramento, and I've been lobbying, visiting with people, okay, for AB 886, okay? It's not perfect, but you know what? In our business, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be ready to go. And I think the way I see it, people have said, oh, well, why should Google pay you for whatever? That's my money. You know, without me paying my folks to write, for my staff to write, they wouldn't be making the money that they're making. So, excuse me, that's my money. So I want to go for it. I'm pushing as hard as I can. And when I was in Sacramento, Google was there. They're concerned. We had somebody, because I'm on board with CNPA, and this is an initiative by us. We had somebody from the Toronto Star, his name is Ryan, and they passed it in Canada. And it's worked, and he's saying, we're selling ourselves short if we just want $100 million. And so that's why they're fighting so hard. So I think it's not going to be perfect, and the reason why, you know, out of state have to have this, I understand, it's because this isn't being passed on a federal level. It's being passed by the state of California. So therefore, there are, you know, help that we can't get, you know, because right now, actually, the feds are dysfunctional. They're not doing the darn thing for anybody. So, you know, I was there with a number of other folks, including the LA Times, the Toronto Stars, EMS. And anyway, so that's my take on it, is that I am impatient, I want to see something, and I think it may not be perfect, but I think I'm going to keep pushing for it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sue, are you?
I would just say, I think there are a couple of things with this bill. I do think there are ways that it could be carried through in this push, but orienting more of the spending on reporting in California. That could be an Alden paper owned across the country, owned by a hedge fund. It could be owned anywhere, but if there are ways to structure it so it's supporting reporting in California, that will do a world of good. It has made a difference in Canada. The other thing that's really down in the weeds with it, but that in this time of AI you have to think about, it's geared to the advertising these platforms are making that may not generate the windfall that it did in Australia or Canada. So, but there is a tension in Sacramento to these issues, and that's very promising, and other states.
I don't know if this is right, Sue, but what I understand is that Alden would get paid for what is generated in California. So you would assume that maybe it was, you know, reported here. I don't know.
No, it's only based on the audience. So given the size of the California audience, you could have a whole lot of companies pull one hell of a lot of money out of California with it.
Great, thank you. Britt, we have a question of you.
Yeah, I'm Peter Long. I'm the editor-in-chief of Capital Name, a nonprofit newsroom here. Just following up, what do you think of in the next iteration or evolution of this, that instead of the money going to media companies, we would create some kind of independent entity? And I'm thinking of something like the BBC in England that goes to, you know, this other entity, a non-governmental, non-profit entity that then distributes the money. Might that be a way?
You think like a CPB, Corporation for Public
Something like that, yeah, so it's not going to all the Aldens of the world.
I can say something about the drive for the new thing, for the new invention of the wheel. I think that the newsroom has to continue acting like it did in the last hundreds of years. Reporters have to report, editors have to edit, and what we have to do is report about what's going on in the community. Any technology will not change that. Any type of organization cannot change that. There ought to be people working inside, in the streets, and coming back to a place where they can find the stories. And that I don't think it's going to change. The internet did not change it, only what it did was lower the quality of what is being created.
Jessica, do you have any insights on?
Yeah, this is similar to what we did in New Jersey. Instead of it being run by like a CBB, it's actually a nonprofit organization that provides some distance so that the government doesn't impose its will on the newsroom. Yeah.
The UC fellowships that also were referred to is a little bit like that. You have the university system as the neutral party, you have 25 million coming from state government, but state government doesn't get to say where these fellows land, which newsrooms win the support. That's a neutral process.
Right, and we're in that program as a finalist, so you know, we don't get the money directly. If we kind of, you know, if we sort of fit with what they want to do, then we'll get the grant, so they're, you know, they have control.
You get the fellow, basically.
Yeah, and then, you know, the fellow's an employee of theirs, you know, so they get the UC benefits plan that we can't afford.
Well, that's a good model.
But yeah, so we.
So Brenda, we have a question up here in the front that I believe is explosive. Is it yours?
Oh my gosh.
Oh, okay.
Hey everyone, I'm Luis Vasquez. I'm with Lava. It's a PR agency. I'm also an Emmy Award-winning producer and writer. My question is about Gustavo Arellano. What I want to think about is he an asset or is he a detriment to the Latino community? He himself today described himself as a stooge for the LA Times. And my question once again is he an asset or a detriment to the Latino community?
Okay, well, let's try to stay on topic, but Gustavo's here if you want to respond.
Yeah, please, yeah.
I'll give you a chance to respond just because I don't know if you don't need.
That's funny.
It is funny.
It is, yeah.
I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we feel Gustavo's a huge asset in our community.
I'm not from Los Angeles.
Yes, question up here?
Where?
There's a question up here.
I think that you answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm EDJ Adler, and I used to work for La Opinión many years ago, and I also collaborated for Latino LA. And my question is this. I think that part of the crisis is due to the lack of trust in the media that we have now. When I studied journalism, encouraged by Pete Moraga, I don't know if anybody remembers Pete Moraga, he was one of my mentors. He taught me a lot. I started working with him when I was 15 years old. And I learned so much from him. And one of the things that I learned was you have to report the news, leave your opinion at the door. And these days, I see a lot of journalists, a lot of reporters disguising the news and delivering their opinion. And I think people see that and they don't trust the news anymore. And I think that's part of the crisis, and I would like your comments on that, please.
And maybe that could be our panelists here or anybody in the audience, if there's any reporter here that wants to talk about that question. Basically, bringing opinion into, yes, do you want to answer that?
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Alba Dinelli. I'm here actually. I am not a journalist. I represent a community-based organization, Our Generation Cares. We are a youth nonprofit. And I believe this is relevant because I believe that the problem that I am seeing as a young professional is that we are not engaging our youth enough. I am actually here and I attend meetings like this because I am here to find out how do I come back to my youth and inspire them with passion and purpose to get involved in their communities, to express their voices. We are about a 90% Latino group in the city of Long Beach. I'm an LA girl, but Long Beach for some reason really has my heart, so I am there helping teenagers ages 14 to 24. I am 33 myself. So I believe we're just not engaged enough. I've recently been told by my youth, well, we're not going to read an article. We're not going to pick up the newspaper. You're going to find on social media, that's where we get all of our information. I'm not into social media. I don't get my information from places like that. But I am here today because I actually get it from Calo News. Thank you, Calo News. This is how I found out about this event. But I'm really lost as a young professional on how do I go back to my teenagers and inspire them to come to things like this, to follow career paths and learn from generations before us because we need intergenerational wisdom. And that is why I'm here. I hope it was relevant, but that's why I had to stand up and say we need to engage our youth and young professionals because we do care. We just need a reason and we just need We just need inspiration. We need a little bit of motivation, especially if, you know, you're from LA or the inner cities. The truth is that we face a lot of adversity. But we are here today because we always pull together. Latinos do that. And it is thanks to that culture that I thank you all for teaching me so much, and I'm still here learning, so thank you.
Thank you so much. I agree. What we're trying to do, again, in experimenting, we're trying to be on every social media platform. So we are trying to launch our TikTok page. And there's just a different way of communicating on each platform. And we're learning. We're trying to figure out the best way to do that. So it's something we're trying. We're doing podcast, video, but that's what it takes on our end. I agree, we do need to be reporters. We need to have a newsroom. We need to act like reporters. But how we engage our audience needs to be varied so that we can try to reach a younger audience. I think that's one of the major issues in the industry we're trying to overcome. So thank you for your question. Brendan.
Can I say something about the fact that I have been in journalism for, I don't know, 45 years, something like that. There is not such a thing as leaving your opinions aside. That's a lie. It doesn't exist. Look at, I don't know, Fox News, MSNBC, both of them tell the truth, and they didn't leave their opinions on the side. Look at whatever you want. But, so, what we need is independence. What we need is the ability to write what is true. And I think this is what we are talking about here.
Right, and I do, if I can add a little bit to that, we need to educate people because there's confusion as to what editorials and opinions are. Everyone used to understand that you would look at the op-ed page and that would either be the unsigned editorial, or it'd be letters to the editor, or it would be a commentary. I think people lost sight of what that means. And so we do have reported news that shouldn't have opinion. It should be the truth, it should be facts. But we also have always had a tradition of opinions. And so we need to make sure that we educate people on how to distinguish between the two. Brenda, you have a question?
Hello, thank you, Consiglio, Los Angeles Journal. So when it comes to representation with news and it being a more communal, especially with Los Angeles, and of course brushing out to the here Chicano community, Latino community, how are we doing that progressively? Because I understand is what I was taught in college. So this is that newspaper is dead. That was actually the first question that my advisor asked us, is newspaper dead? And there was no right or wrong answer. And so when it comes to the social media platform or the web media platform, how are you reaching out? Like there are sectors here in Los Angeles specifically, like Chicano Hollywood, now Latino freelance. Has there been any sort of reach out to those specific sectors, and if not, why? And do we even know about them? Because right now the topic is the deepening journalism crisis in LA, but there are outlets. If this is not known, and there is a Chicano renaissance, a Latino renaissance happening right now within the multimedia platform, why is that not being spoken about?
Anybody want to take that?
I think several people said here that there is a renaissance in Latino journalism and outlets. And this meeting is part of the renaissance. I'm not sure I can answer the question another way.
But isn't this will speak about kind of like a death of journalism within the community when there are outlets available?
Yeah, I think that the idea is that we know that there's outlets and we want to try to make sure that we are amplifying those outlets. So it would be good for us, maybe we can get in touch and we can talk a little bit more about some of the outlets you're talking about. But if you look at the Latino Media Collaborative, and a lot of the organizations that are here are online only and not print. Websites. I know. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but I think we're trying to move in that direction. It's not all death and gloom. We do know that newspapers have been struggling, print newspapers, but we're trying to experiment and try to come up with new ideas for the future, and that could be a lot of the outlets that you mentioned.
And then also, you kind of, completely with that, is it more about money or is it more about the news and information for people?
Well, and that's bottom line is that we do need to be able to pay journalists, and we do need to make sure that it's a career that people can do and thrive in.
Okay.
Sure. We're going to have about 5 more minutes of questions, so let me, I think right here and then over here.
Yeah. Raymond Diaz with Vesper Corporations, my years Vesper Corporations. Going to your comment about the new reporters out there on their blogs or on their social media, as a publicist, I'm having a hard time reaching out to them. I could go to La Opinion, I could go to the masthead, find their contact, find their email, find out their beat, and then send them the story that matches up. But with the new media, I'm not finding it. They're not making themselves available, and I can tell that there is no, they have no editor, and that's the issue too. Where you need, like Gabriel said, you need an editor. The reporter needs an editor to guide the story, to assign, if anything, assign a story. So that's what I'm missing on that. I don't know if that's the question.
Hi, my Luz from Vesper Public Relations. I've been in the industry for very long. We work a lot with music clients and community, and our challenge throughout the years, I have seen it, is education of the reporters. I feel some of the reporters now versus the past are not educated on, say, music. It's hard for me to talk about an Oscar de Leon, who's a legend, to somebody and educate them about who they are, because they're fans of today's music, which is perfectly fine, if they like Karol G or if they like corridos tumbados, but to have the basic knowledge, if you're a music journalist, of the past, that's why all of those artists are here today, because the people from Oscar de Leon, from Santana, from Tigres del Norte, all those people were huge without the internet. So to me, our challenge every day is educating people, whether it's music, because if they don't relate to it, whether it's a community program, they don't relate to it. And there is a disconnect. I know Chicano Hollywood because I live in the valley. And I know them, I know about them, and I know their work, and they're doing great things. But there is a disconnect.
And I follow them on Facebook, by the way.
Yeah, between Chicano, and between Mexicano, and between Centroamericano, there's still a disconnect.
And Mariluz, we go way back.
Of course.
We were young 20-year-olds back when we were
Yes.
starting. We were tough, back in the day.
Yeah,
Good to see you. We have one over here, and then I promise, last one, we got Gustavo has a question.
Yeah, my name is Richard Zaldivar, executive director of the Martha Diaz Askenazy. We're an HIV/AIDS LGBT Latino organization, and I think this is such an important conversation because when we talk about underserved populations in the Latino community, there's no greater underserved population than the LGBTQ Latino community. When you stop to think, if you have an immigrant who happens to be lesbian, who's dealing with a domestic violence issue or drug issue, people don't talk to her. Stories have to be covered. And so this is an important conversation. I think we need to really educate the community because the community is starved for truth, not biased opinions. And then the second thing I want to say that, we went through a lot in building the AIDS monument. And the people who were very supportive to us were the people that were in this room. Lozano, La Opinion to begin with, and Gabriel after that. La Opinion covered us, and he covered the truth. That's why I think this conversation is so important, because we need publications that talk about truth in those communities. And so, I have a fear moving forward about how we may lose our democratic freedoms, in the future. This is an important issue, and we must continue to have these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, yeah, we all agree. Thank you very much. Last question, Gustavo.
Can I answer? Okay. Last question.
Sorry, thank you. Gustavo Arellano, Los Angeles Times. To bridge sort of what the young lady there was asking to the president, just the issue of this media, with quotes, that's one of the things I do see with nonprofit journalism, the smaller newsrooms. They're great. I think it does important stuff. But a lot of folks that are running them are frankly people who came from failed institutions, basically the legacy media. Meanwhile, you have an entire, you talk about ecosystems, you have a huge ecosystem of people doing great reporting, but just one person, whether it's a Substack, whether it's Instagram. You also have young people like LA Public Press doing amazing stuff. I donated, everyone should donate to LA Public Press and Capital Maine. Where's Danny right there? What's up, Peter right there. So how do you folks who are getting the money, who want to get these millions of dollars to create new nonprofit newsrooms, how do you get those young people to funnel them into your organizations, to be able to pay them a living wage? Because here's the thing, there is a demand for news. You all know it, we all know it. And there's been such ignorance of communities that people are doing it for free. People realize how important it is that they're giving it out for free, and I think that's completely unhealthy in the sense that these folks should be getting paid for it. They should be getting good jobs out of it and to create that profession. So how do we old people get the young people into our craft?
I'll address this a little bit. One, I do want to come back to a fact that may be a myth. People think in the nonprofits that they're all volunteering. They're not. The salaries are actually about the same as for-profit journalism across the U.S. But there aren't enough jobs. There aren't enough paying jobs. That's clear. I think you were right 10 years ago that almost all this new stuff was founded by people displaced or coming out of traditional media. That's not what we're seeing now. We're seeing a whole lot of individuals, some of them journalists, many of them not, just saying, okay, we have to do something and figuring out a new way of doing it. So it's really changed, I would say, in the last 5 years. The economic battle, though, to create a living wage, and journalism is a risky profession. You get sued. You sometimes get beat up. It really involves risk. People put themselves out there, they put their name on whatever they write and get abuse even just from that, or they're out selling ads as a publisher. So it's a tough profession to go into, and I think this is a key issue. If we want it in our communities, it comes right back to what's happening to philanthropy or business support or individual support, because I don't think people can or should do it for free. I think it's really hard. The one exception I will just say is that there are really interesting models around citizen volunteers going to document public meetings and bringing it back to journalism, and people volunteering as part of their community efforts, and that's kind of cool, but those are defined.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, guys. And with that, I think we're going to close the Q&A, and I'm going to ask Miguel Santana, President and CEO of the California Community Foundation, to give our closing remarks. Thank you all.
Buenas noches, everyone. Well, this has been very, not only interesting, but I like the tension in the room. Because the stakes that we're talking about are very significant. As I was sitting, listening to the conversation and reflecting on what I was going to share, believe it or not, what came to mind was one of the jobs that I used to have. I've had many jobs working at the city, at the county, in philanthropy, but I actually ran a fair. I was the president and CEO of the LA County Fair. And how many of you have been at the fair? Okay. Yes, you met there, yes. And I remember this conversation I had with one of our board members who's a judge, Latino, the Honorable Blancarte, who grew up going to the fair and had this emotional attachment to the Mexican village. You guys remember the Mexican Village? It was like an Olvera street in the fair that was established early on. The fair is 100 years old, like in the 1920s. Not because the founders of the fair believed in diversity, equity, inclusion, but because they saw a market. There were Mexicans who also liked the fair. And so they said, if we mimic their experience, maybe they'll come. And guess what we did? And so the Honorable Concarte grew up going to the fair, and he lived in Pomona as a child. And we were walking around at the fair one day, and he got very emotional. He said, I have one thing to ask you as the new president and CEO of Fairplex. I need you to bring back the Mexican Village. And I looked at him and I said, look around, Your Honor. We are the entire place. We're not a special market, we are the market. And so the reason I raise that story is because it's a paradigm shift of how we see ourselves. When you combine Latinos and communities of color, we are the majority population. As Sue said, we are Los Angeles. And sometimes I get worried when we have these conversations about whether it's a press or business or philanthropy, we operate as outsiders, as though we're fighting for the little crumbs around the table, when we're sitting around the table, sharing the meeting, and oftentimes deciding what the agenda is. And so I think it's time that we start acting that way. I was also reminded as we were talking, given such an important investment that Cabo News is making to Sela, the community that I grew up in Bell Gardens. And thank you, Wilma, for my Sela keychain that she gave me today. Because you're absolutely right. There's nothing in that community that reflects the community and is talking about the importance of what's happening there. I've known many editors of the LA Times, and Kevin Morita, love him or hate him. I'll share a story about him. He had just arrived to the city, and he was new to LA, and the LA Times wrote yet another story about the corridor corruption in Sela, the community that I know. And so I was at the Weingart Foundation, and I called Antonia, who ran TCF, and I said, our two foundations have invested significantly in this community, and we know there's a much bigger story in our community than the regular story that gets printed. So let's write him a letter and invite him to drag his ass out to Sela, thinking that would never happen. Well, guess what? He came. And he met with Wilma, and he met with a group of leaders who told the story of how our community had to fight for itself during the pandemic, fight for vaccines and testing, and making sure that our kids were educated and had access to digital equity. And so it's important that that story, the real story of our community, gets told on a regular basis. And so I was reminded of that when you made that investment, because it's such an important part to tell the story from the perspective of the community, not as an anthropologist sort of looking at how the natives live, but actually from our perspective about the issues that most matter in the way that we define what those issues are. I really want to talk about the important underlying message that I think Martha said so eloquently about the fact that journalism is a mission-driven organization. So I've spent my entire career in government or in the nonprofit sector and philanthropy, driven by a mission, a mission of public good. And that is what makes the work that you do so critical. The world could go on without an LA County Fair. It cannot go on without all of you. And the point that was made that I thought was brilliant about journalism is about the community and whether or not we want to live in a democracy. So that's what's at stake here. It's not just whether we have something to read on Sunday morning, but whether or not we want to have a democracy that reflects the community itself. And Gabriel alluded to was that we're in a moment in time where the effort to undermine that democracy is real. It's well-funded, it's strategic, it's very intentional, they have a long-term view, and it starts by being systematically undermining institutions. And this institution, which you all represent, is the most important of them all. Because what you represent is accountability. You represent an ability to advance issues that have been ignored. And you represent the ability for a community to tell its own story. And in a United States of America, where the minority will become the majority, that becomes very threatening. To have us tell our own story from our own point of view, with our own values, and our own way that we define ourselves as American, because everyone in this room is in fact an American. I think Gabriel kept on inserting in his comments that we can make all kinds of different fancy ways of creating what this is about, but the most important underlying values of the work that you do is independence, and I would add the word transparency. It is important to know who wrote that story. It is important to know what facts they use. It is important to know what process is being used to establish that news. It is important to know who funds that. Because in the darkness, it gets manipulated intentionally to manipulate a community. And the most effective way of manipulating a community is by getting them to not care or to feel completely disconnected and disillusioned and not wanting to participate. 2 days ago, I met with a group of young climate activists. It was a group, the oldest person there, beyond me, I was the oldest person multiple times over, was a 25-year-old, and the youngest person there was 10. And they were holding my feet to the fire as to why philanthropy doesn't fund climate change. And as they should. That's their job, to make my life uncomfortable, which they did very effectively. But what surprised me when I asked them about voter engagement, most of them were voting age, is that they had a very articulate and well thought out position as to why they choose not to vote. It literally as a choice that it's a broken system, why am I going to contribute to it? It doesn't really matter. But yet this is a group of young people who are literally holding, rallies and protests in front of the mayor, the governor, the president. And so I try to make the connection for them as to why it matters as this old 54-year-old dude coming to them. And it worried me, because that's not an accident. That is intentional. For them to believe that the very system that they're trying to influence, they can't in the one specific way they're able to. That instead it matters what they post on social media and what they say. And so, but I also left thinking that it's really my failure, because what I fail to understand is from their perspective. So one of the challenges, and I'm so glad you raised what you raised, is that the solutions that come out of this era of discovery, this renaissance that you described, is frankly not going to come from the people in this room. It's not about us, it's about them. It has to be relevant to them so that they understand what's at stake and they're understanding the news in the way that matters to them. You know, when I was running Fairplex, I would often say, I'm the worst person to ask how to invite people to come. You should ask my 4 millennial daughters. And I did, I used them as a focus group to help me say that. But I watched what my millennial daughters do and how they consume information. You know, for Christmas, they asked me for a subscription of LA Taco, okay? And so I subscribe to LA Taco like a lot of people in this room, and they asked me for it. Because for them, it's not just about the news, and they do hard-hitting news, and they are about accountability, but they also want to know where to eat. That matters to them. Because what they're talking about is the Angelino experience. And so it's, I often would think about is, you know, being Latino means that you are my daughters, but you're also my parents, who every single day, Gabriel and Monica, has La Opinión at our house. They read it cover to cover. And Channel 34 was part of the family. It was always playing, like in many households. They're Latino too, as I am, who does read the LA Times regularly and the New York Times and other consumer of other media outlets. Philanthropy has a very important role to play here. And we're in a process of discovery ourselves. Because we often think about our role in the same way that Gabriel talked about what's really truly objective. We often think about our role as being objective when in fact we're not. We have a point of view and we have a bias. But we are having a very intentional conversation about what way does philanthropy support what's happening. And the way I think about it, both at the Weingart Foundation and CCF, is that if we're about social justice or racial justice, we're operating within a framework that is democracy. And so, in order to have a democracy, you have to have an informed population. And that information comes from all of you in this room. And so we are going to increasingly be in the business of supporting the work that you do. Which for philanthropy is a stretch. We're not used to doing that. But it's an important thing because it's central to our mission and purpose to have a better, stronger, more thriving, and more inclusive Los Angeles. And so we're, at CCF, we're establishing a fund. We haven't figured out the name, so I'll invite invitations. We're still brainstorming, but it's really centered around the point that was made earlier about what does it look like to have a multiracial democracy. For us, it starts by having an engaged population, community, and there's a lot of ways of being engaged, and being informed is an important step in that. It also means supporting efforts that are advancing a story from the community's perspective so that we're in charge of our narrative and not having others define it for us. It means advancing legislation in Sacramento and Washington that in fact is requiring government to intervene. And it's, when you think about it, that's actually not as revolutionary as it sounds. Because government currently subsidizes information. It's called a library system. And that system was established a couple hundred years ago, and the government funds it. Every public library that we have here is subsidized by government. Your publications are in there. And so what government needs to now realize is the way people consume information is different today.
It's not just going to your local library. You can now have the world accessible by your phone. And so how do we adapt to that? And so we're going to be joining you in advancing for those legislative solutions to provide an ongoing revenue stream for the important work that you do, because we believe in protecting our democracy. And that's an important part of the work that you're all doing. The last thing I'll say, two last things that I'll say, that it's not just important what all of you do, but it's also important of who is telling our story. And I do have to make a special shout out to one person here who I respect immensely, who is about holding newsrooms accountable to reflect our community, and that's Martha Diaz sitting over there. Sonia, she's the director of Latino Policy and Politics Institute at UCLA. She's a chingona. She has fought to make sure that Latinos are represented in the editorial pages, through op-ed pieces. And it's been great to see you on news, reporting and giving analysis, not just on Latino politics, but LA politics. Because LA politics are Latino politics. So thank you for doing that. And the last thing I'll say, I promise this will be the last, is that in this ecosystem of coverage, we can't give up on the LA Times. That's a controversial statement in this room. And it's not just because I believe Gustavo is an asset, but because the LA Times is an institution that provides a through line in our community. And so that doesn't mean that we stop holding the LA Times accountable and demand that they cover our community. In fact, we must insist on that. And the way you cover our community is by simply being in our community, having our community tell the stories, and giving the ability to inform the public about the ways our communities are thriving, the way we celebrate and love, and the way we struggle from a place of love, not from a place of hate. And so I, for one, not ready to give up on the LA Times, and I hope we're all there wanting to make sure that they thrive, and at the same time, doing the important work that each one of you do to ensure that our communities in Sela, in Boyle Heights, in the Northeast San Fernando Valley, covering issues from a perspective that's important to a community, for a community, continues to thrive. Thank you very much.
So much, and I'll be closing the speaking program for today. Miguel, thank you so much for your words. You're such a terrific speaker. I always love hearing your remarks. I have 2 pages here, but I'll cut it down really short so we can get to the food and the drinks outside. We appreciate all of our speakers coming together today to really rally around solutions to address these pressing challenges facing journalism. I want to take a moment to recognize one of our core strategic partners in addition to our speakers today, Armando Varela, the executive editor at La Opinión. Thank you so much. If you want to stand for a second. And then in addition to participating in today's Diálogo, we really invite you to continue supporting our work, whether as a fellow advocate, a funder, a policy influencer. We hope you'll attend our next Diálogo event, which is taking place in Southeast Los Angeles, as has been mentioned earlier. It's going to be taking place in May. This second dialogo will focus on social, economic, environmental, political challenges facing Southeast Los Angeles and how we can create transformative narratives that empower the community. And as mentioned before, we'll be unveiling a journalism initiative there. So we hope you all can join us there. We hope that you'll continue, following our work. We'll be sharing with you other ways that you can join and participate in our programming and learning more about ways to become a fellow comrade with us. Thank you again for attending. And again, there's food outside. There is a cashless bar outside as well. So please enjoy yourselves and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you.